Ruven, good to see you. You made it in. That's okay, you need to eat. Have your bite, have your snack. And Shalom Asher, thank you for all your work with the getting this stuff on YouTube. We're learning the laws of Kashrut. We started to talk about the species, different species that are kosher animals and non-kosher animals. And we got through talking about the mammals and talking about, we talked about behema and chaya. Who can tell me what's a behema versus a chaya? The 3 that the Torah mentioned versus the 7 that the Torah mentioned as kosher animals. What was special about the 3?
The 3 get sacrificed for the altar.
That's right, only those 3 are kosher for sacrifice. It's called domesticated animals usually.
Yeah, the chaya.
And the chaya were the wild
Just like
animals.
wild animals.
That's right. So we have the list of 10, and we also have the simanim, the signs, which are the signs of the kosher animals. We said the 2 basic ones of the split hooves and chum mekad, and the Torah itself giving us 4 counterexamples: 3 animals which chew their cud and do not have split hooves, and 1 animal which does have split hooves but does not chew its cud. Who remembers which one that was?
The pig.
That was the pig. That was the pig.
And we talked about turkeys too.
And then we went on to talk about, after the mammals, we finished with the mammals. Also the mammals, by the way, there's a big discussion about an animal called the jabo. The jabo is some form of a bull, some kind of a bull that was brought over from Madagascar, which was not known. It's about 100 years ago. And there's a debate about it. Chazon Ish said it's not a kosher animal. It's not a bull. It's not from that species. But other poskim disagreed. And it had all the simanim. It had all the signs. It had split hooves and it does, but it sort of looked like a bull with like some kind of had a hump in it. And the truth is, Rabbi Melamed says it's kosher. And his proof text, his proof for it is that most people paskin against the Chazon Ish is because in most flocks of cows and bulls today, they interbreed them, about 25% of them, with this special type of jabo to make them stronger, to make them immune from disease. Apparently that helps them not be prone to disease. And that shows you, he says, Rabbi Melamed says, that shows you that we don't consider it to be a non-kosher mammal. But each new discovery, there's a discussion in the halacha. Does it have all the simanim? There's other simanim we mentioned about the mammals as well, not necessarily as critical. The one about the flesh under the tail, about having these type of little what do we call them? Huh?
Canine teeth.
Canine teeth, and the fact whether the cheese can be made from the milk of that. We mentioned those other conditions as well. That's what was discussing the mammals. We also discussed the birds, but Moshe really wants to say something.
So, forgive me if it sounds like a stupid question, but when rabbis and poskim are discussing whether or not a newly discovered species is or is not kosher, what part does genetic testing have to do with this? For instance, if we show, 20,000 years ago, this animal and the domestic cow had a common ancestor, So what, if that could be frozen, if that could be proven just purely using genetic science, would that have an impact on that discussion?
Not very much. As we said, we mentioned yesterday that the way that the zoologists classify different types of animals is not really what we go by. We go by the signs that the Torah gave us, and therefore the genetic makeup wouldn't really make that much of a difference, in my opinion. It's a relatively recent ability that we have to the genetic, code. So I don't think it's been done much. But in this context, I don't think it would have much of a difference anyways. We go by the signs, and the discussion is when it doesn't have all the signs, or some of the signs and not the others. We talked about this issue of having the canines, these front teeth that are usable. We also discussed the birds yesterday. The birds, the kosher and non-kosher birds. For some reason, the Torah has a list of 24 non-kosher birds. The assumption is that everything else, anything other than that, would be kosher. The common custom, though, is that we do not eat birds that we do not have a tradition about. What are the signs for the kosher birds? The Torah doesn't really give signs. The Torah gives a list. Anything that's not on the list should be kosher. We said that the signs rabbinically were that if it's a predatory of other birds or not, whether it has this extra toe, and whether it has a zafek, this is I think a gullet, and that it's kurkevan, this internal organ, can be peeled. Those are signs that it's tahor. But in the bottom line is, we follow tradition, and we got lucky with the turkey, I guess. That the first rabbis that saw it defined it as a hen, as a form of a chicken, even though it might not be zoologically correct.
I think it is.
It is zoologically
I can
correct.
check this.
I'm not sure, but in any case, it got its way in, and now most people do eat turkey as well as duck and the other things which we said we have a tradition about. Okay. That's the fish, yeah. That's the birds, yeah.
Right, I was just checking on this one. It says, do not cook meat in milk. When it comes to birds, like chicken or turkey, would that be considered as meat, or would it be considered as parve? Because I have heard before that it was parve back in the days.
So about 2,000 years ago, in the times of the Mishnah, formative book of Jewish people, right? So I always like to say, there's a debate, some machloket, Tzina Tanaim. Rabbi Yossi Aglili was the only one. It's the minority opinion. He was of the opinion that you can have fowl, chicken, together with milk. But the majority of the rabbis didn't agree with him, and apparently the followers of Rabbi Yossi in the Galilee, and Rabbi Yossi Haglili, that is from the Galilee, he was in the Galil, his town, people who followed him, they would have chicken with milk, but everybody else would not. And we usually follow the halacha follows the majority, and therefore that opinion was rejected. And for time immemorial, or since then, the halacha has been decided that chicken is considered to be meat, and but rabbinically, I think most people believe it's only rabbinically considered to be meat, and that it's useful to know when you have something by accident happens. But for all intents and purposes, we treat poultry as meat. Okay?
And however, just another question.
But we're going to get to that. That's in the next volume. We talk a lot about the mixing of meat and milk. We're not talking about. We're just defining the species now. What is a kosher fish?
Fins and scales.
Open up. Vayikra 11. We stopped you in the middle yesterday because we did the animals and then we did the fowl. Now let's do the fish. Vayikra 11, verse 9. Who's going to read for me? What page?
202. Yeah, 202.
Verse 11 is on 203.
203.
Asher, read it for us.
Verse 11, right?
Yeah.
They shall
9, verse 9.
Oh, sorry. Verse 9.
Chapter 11, verse 9.
These shall ye eat of all that are in the waters, whatsoever have fins and scales in the waters in the seas, and in the rivers, them shall you eat. And all that have not fins and scales in the seas and in the rivers, of all that move in the waters, and of any living thing which is in the waters, they shall be an abomination unto you. They shall be even an abomination unto you. You shall not eat of their flesh, but you shall have their carcasses in abomination.
Okay, stop there. So, what are the two signs of a kosher fish?
Fins and
And scales. The halacha is, a fin, of course, is, the fins on the animal. It helps it swim, and the scales cover the body. Some of it, the halacha is even if it has one fin and one scale, that's kosher. The scale is something which is usually connected only on one side to the skin of the fish, and the other side is loose, sort of moves. Even one of them is good enough. So if you can find one, if you don't know if this is a kosher fish or not, you can, and you don't see any scales, but maybe there's a really small scale. So you wrap it up in a cloth and rub it, and then when you take the fish away and you open up and you see a scale there, I guess there was a scale, good enough to say it's kosher. Why is that? What about the fins? The rabbis told and said that any fish that has a scale, rabbis 2,000 years ago, they wrote this in the Talmud, said every fish that has the scales also has a fin. And we've come to find that that's true. I don't think there's not yet been found a fish that has fins but doesn't have scales. And so really, it can all boil down to one.
There are a lot of fish that have, just none of them
He
are
meant to
kosher.
say that has scales that doesn't have fins.
There's none that have scales that don't have fins. That's what I meant. Did I,
None
not
that
what I
have
said?
Scale? No, you said the other
You
way
said the
around.
opposite.
Oh, no, the opposite. Yeah, sorry.
That's why I was like,
So
what?
basically, the scales is the only
Scales
sign
without,
that counts.
let me think,
That is amazing
maybe a
that
sea snake, but that's a snake.
at 2,000 years, sages are not proven wrong in that. It's amazing.
It is
And
pretty
in,
amazing.
and in fish, we don't have to have a tradition either, unlike birds where we have to have a tradition.
Don't that's correct.
So I could, if I did some genetic engineering and I came up with a shark that had scales, that would now not be a shark, it would be something, it would be a kosher fish.
Interesting, if you did genetic engineering.
Hey,
That's
Rob.
interesting. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't
I
know.
figured out genealogically where chickens and turkeys converge. It's a family
Be
called
diverse.
Converge. Converge.
That's
Phasianidae are a family of heavy ground-living birds which includes pheasants, partridges, jungle fowl, chickens, turkeys, old world quail, and peafowl.
When
And
was
those are
it?
all kosher.
When was it?
Correct.
Well, no, this is the family, the genealogical.
Right, but I'm
family.
saying, but when did the genealogical, when was it last, how far back do we have to go?
I don't think it goes that chronologically like that. They're just trying
Well,
to-
kind of, but
I don't know.
I don't know like when I don't know when it converged, but or like when it split. But all those birds that I just listed, pheasants are kosher, correct? Partridges are kosher. Jungle fowl.
I don't know what that is.
Old world quail, peacocks are kosher, correct?
I don't know.
I don't
I
think
don't know. I don't know. I don't think we have a tradition of eating them.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good question.
So we have to eat
That's-
them for a few
that's
hundred
when it
years and they're
converged.
kosher.
So the truth is, fish do not have.
That's what we're.
This is interesting. This is going to come up with the next category, where there's 4 categories of animals. There's the mammals, there's the birds, there's the fish, which we're discussing now, and then there's grasshoppers. Grasshoppers is coming next. Regarding these last 2, fish and the grasshoppers, there's no biblical prohibition of aver min hachai. So technically, you could cut off a piece of fish while the fish is still alive and eat it. But that's prohibited rabbinically, or Ramah says it's Baal Tashatsu, Rav Kook said it's cruel, it's a way of cruelty, it teaches you to be cruel, so we shouldn't do it, although technically there's no prohibition of Evi Menachem. Let's talk about grasshoppers just a little bit. Let's open up the pasuk. Verse 20, you're on the same page,
Yeah.
just go down to verse 20. Asher, you want to keep reading?
All fowls that flee going upon 4 shall be an abomination to you. Yet these may ye eat of every flying creeping thing that goeth upon 4, which have legs above their feet, to leap withal upon the earth.
So what does this mean? There's a type of a bug, it's called the grass, we call them in general grasshoppers, that has 4 legs, right? Walks on 4, so we have 2 sets of 2 legs. And also, the Torah says, it has an additional set of legs, which are called kra'ayim, which for jumping, right? They have these, they usually, they go up higher than the legs. and the legs going upwards, like a big knee attached to them so that they can jump. And also they're called, those are the two simanim of a kosher grasshopper, that it's got two pairs of legs and a third pair of bigger legs that allows it to jump. Okay, the rabbis added on another two signs of kosher grasshoppers, and one is that they have 4 wings, not just 2 wings, but 4 wings. And the fourth one, the second one from the rabbinically, is that the wings cover most of their body. Okay, now, if you look in the Torah, the next pasuk, verse 22, the Torah gives words for these types of kosher locusts, grasshoppers or locusts. Please read verse 22. Asher, you're doing such a great job.
Even these of them ye may eat, the arbe after his kind.
Arbe, that's word number 1. Okay, arbe, it's one word for grasshopper. Okay.
And the solam,
Salam.
salam, after his kind. And the hargol,
Hargol.
hargol, after his kind. And the chagab,
And the
Chagav.
Chagav.
after his kind.
So many times people use chagav as a general term for grasshoppers. Most commonly, arbe is the term used for the kosher grasshoppers. The truth is, the rabbi said that there's a derivative of each kind. There's just like there's 4 names of kosher grasshoppers. There's also an additional 4 names. I can tell you what they are. But I have them here in Hebrew. There's,
I think in English, crickets, grasshoppers, locusts, and.
no, these are rabbinic names for a specific species.
Okay.
In any case, both the fish and the grasshoppers, there's no Shrita involved, and there's no Aver Mina Chai, but again, you shouldn't eat from them because it's disgusting when they're still alive. And some people say that the general category of kosher ones are called chagav, as I said. In other words, when people call this a chagav, that's an additional sign that it's kosher. But according to that, some people say people call locusts all sorts of things. They call them all the different names. They don't really call them chagav. So we can't eat them because they don't have the sign that they're being called chagav. However, if your community has a tradition of which are kosher grasshoppers, then that takes precedence. If you have a tradition that they're called grasshoppers, even if they're not called by the name chagav, then they're still kosher. And as is well known, the Yemenites and many Moroccan Jews have a tradition about which type of grasshoppers are kosher, and they eat them. And if you, and we can rely on their tradition, if you want to eat grasshoppers according to their tradition, and then it's kosher.
I've had locusts.
You've had them,
Here?
Ruben, what do they taste like?
Here? Well, first of all, there's not much taste to them, but it tastes just a teeny bit like carob.
Like
Carrot.
what? Like,
You tried it before?
Yeah, locusts, yeah.
like a
Where
what?
do you
sorry?
get them?
In Israel.
There's a special group that tries to makes kosher meals, all sorts of exotic foods, which we don't usually eat. And so they,
Called carrot?
two friends of mine actually, they run this, they started it.
That's what it tastes like.
And,
What's a carrot?
You said no, we don't have to do anything to the blood on fish. Is that even true of the larger species like tuna, that when if you've ever, there's a lot of blood in the tuna.
Who cares?
Is that still the issue?
I
It's
don't
still
think
no
it's,
issue?
I don't think it's prohibited.
Try out some stuff. It's
It's prohibited, but I'm not sure.
I'm reading the Wikipedia.
Okay. let's,
The Asian needs to fight in China.
any more questions on the fish or locusts? Okay. I understand that it's sort of like eating garni, eating like seeds.
Apparently,
There's-
Crunchy type of thing.
no, apparently, insects and bugs are the highest source of like
Protein.
farmed protein.
Protein, yeah.
You
I wish
should
I had
live
a
in a
tradition
pod,
about
dude.
it,
Huh?
but
You
I
should
really
live in
don't
a
want
pod,
them. I don't want them around because they're destructive, right? These four names are all types which all those words in Hebrew mean something like destroying. There's also four stages of there's four stages. There's words in Hebrew which we're going to come up in the parsha, next week's parsha, when they talk about the plagues. Right? They talk about the plague of locusts or grasshoppers, the plague, and there it uses a number of different words for the arbe. Yelek, chasil, gazam, and these are apparently part of the way the growth of the grasshopper is. At first, the mother grasshopper lays an egg, and when it comes out, the creature comes out, it's called the yelek, which is like a small worm, like a caterpillar type of thing, that eats a lot of the vegetation. And then this worm, it sheds its skin, this caterpillar sheds its skin, and it grows up, and it's called a chasil, because it eats even more of the vegetation in the land. And then this chasil also sheds its skin, and it gets bigger, and it becomes called a gazam. A gazam, this also is very destructive. It eats all sorts of vegetation, everything that's growing, until it gets finally really becomes an adult. In the fourth stage, it grows its wings, and only then does it becomes the locust. It becomes the arbe. The arbe. This is the stage. So the truth is, if you know which species it is, we said one of the signs is that it has to have wings. It's kosher even in its earlier stages, even before it has its wings, if it's that species.
So that would tie back to the question, in the same way, somebody asked, I think it was yesterday, I forget if it was Ezra, no, who was telling about the young camel that
Yeah.
hooves are not yet.
It was here.
Was Hirsch,
Mm.
who asked about the young camels that I guess have cloven hooves.
Right.
So the same answer, is that because it grows up
Because
without
it's
it, it's
gonna-
not kosher even as a
As when
small
it's
one.
young. That's
In
right.
this case, even though it doesn't yet have the wings, even as a young one,
Right.
it's already
Yeah, fair.
kosher.
Yeah, fair. That's a good comparison. Okay, we're done. Let's move on. The laws of Shrita.
Where are we?
The laws of Shrita actually, Dvarim Yud Bet. Look up Dvarim 12, verse 21. I mentioned it to you the other day, but now we have the book open. Why not open it up? Dvarim 12. What page? Verse 21.
354. Oh, different?
Devarim
11, you said?
12,
12, yeah, that's
Oh,
right,
sorry.
254, you're right.
350.
verse 21. David, why don't you
Six.
read it for us?
356.
And you shall
He's still
slaughter
355.
12, is it 12, wait, 11, no, you said 11 what?
12,
You said
21.
12, 21.
Yud Bet Chafal.
I'm,
357, yes.
357.
I'm seeing if the place which the Lord thy God has chosen, what are you talking about? Must be at the wrong spot.
It's 357, top
Okay,
left.
so read the entire thing. Keep going.
Oh, wait, I see 12.
Verse 21?
Verse 21, you said,
Yes,
Rabbi?
yes.
If the place which the Lord thy God has chosen to put his name there be too far from thee, and thou shalt kill of thy herd and of thy flock, which the Lord hath given thee, as I have commanded thee. and thou
Stop. It was right there. You didn't see it? So you're too far away from the Beit HaMikdash, so you want to have meat though. You don't want to have only meat when you go to Jerusalem. You want to have meat in Tel Aviv. So what do? And you shall kill, what was the translation?
Thy heart herd.
You
Thy herd, of thy herd,
You should kill of thy herd. So you kill of thy herd
and of thy flock.
and of thy flock. How should you kill them?
Which the Lord hath given thee, as I
As
commanded.
I have commanded.
The orator.
Where's the commandment?
Oral
It
Torah.
doesn't say anywhere how you should kill your herd and your fowl. That the Torah should say, as I have commanded you. This is an oddity in the text. And proof of the Torah. Many people say this is the proof of the oral Torah. We see that there were rules about Shrita which are not written. God says,
It's very general.
oh, kill them or slaughter them. Essentially it's saying, as I've commanded you. We don't find any command in the Torah about how to slaughter. It's the oral law. The oral law teaches us there is a specific way. Now, it's not purely oral law because the Torah has a concept. If you go back, go forward to Devarim 14 instead of 12. Go to 14. Verse 21.
361.
Page 361. Read it, Asher.
You shall not eat of anything that died of itself. Thou shalt give it unto the stranger that is in thy gates, that he may eat it, or thou mayst sell it unto an alien, for thou art an holy, so difficult word. Thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God.
So what happened? What happened here? Don't eat any
Dead animals.
dead animals. Why not? All the animals you eat are dead. I hope you're not eating live animals. That's forbidden from the Torah. That's what it says in the Bereshit.
They have bacteria in it.
So that's right. So of course you're eating dead animals. What do you mean you have to not eat dead animals? No. What does it mean? You have to kill it
With the command.
in a specific way. In a specific way. This is in Hebrew called nevela. Nevela is an animal which was not killed in the kosher way, with a kosher Shrita. Right? Nevela. Even if you try to do a kosher Shrita and you do it wrong, that's called a nevela. Any animal that's not been kosherly slaughtered. So we have the flip side. That's a specific pasuk. Don't eat a dead animal. What do you mean? Of course you eat a dead animal. That's what we eat. A dead animal that's been killed without the proper procedure being taken for shechita, that's called a nevela. There's another prohibition, which we spoke about, you remember maybe, it's called treifa. That where the word treif comes in, we all know people say things that are not kosher are treif. That's from treifa. Treifa is a torn animal, which means
When they make
that-
it cut, it doesn't.
no, actually, usually it means that it's an animal that it's torn and therefore it's not going to live. It's a blemished animal. It's an animal that is unhealthy, and you're not allowed to eat an animal that's not going to be doesn't have a length of life in front of it. That's called treifa. But the nevela is that there's specifically a problem with the shechita. It was killed not in the way of shechita.
I've seen at livestock auctions in the US that there'll be an animal that's dying. And you can't make human food out of an animal that dies on its own. But they'll move it up in the auction to an earlier spot so they can auction it off and somebody can kill it.
Wait, you
before-
can't make food on a dying animal?
An animal that dies on its own in the US, you can't use for human consumption. You can only use it for animal consumption. But they'll take an animal that was going to die, that was going to be auctioned like the next day, that's really, really sick. They'll auction it off so someone can kill it quickly and eat it.
Right.
That seems interesting.
If it has a blemish that would
Yeah,
cause
this isn't halakha, this is the US law.
Right.
But I'm using it to explain why halakha, we have some of the rules that we have as to the health of the animal at the time of
That's right.
Shrita.
If the animal can't live for a year, it gets a definition of a treifa. And then even if you shech, it's still not kosher.
Let's say that animal met an accident.
That's right.
Should still be considered treifa.
It depends what happened to it in the accident. You could have an accident.
It was bleeding and it was.
It depends. It depends on what kind of wound it was, which part of the body was wounded, and there's a list of blemishes which our rabbis determined the animal won't be able to live for a year. That's called a treifa.
That's why if you want to go hunting, you really have to have a pen to keep it, for a lot of things, they'll keep it.
As I
for a
said,
year.
Sure,
yeah.
Because you catch it with the net, you release it into the pen, you wait a year, that's the for sure way to,
It's not just for.
Okay, let's proceed.
or till it recovers at least.
Other nations take example of it.
Which pasuk, sorry?
It's.
Also, you should look at Dvarim 12. I know we skipped to 14 for a minute. Look at Dvarim 12:22. I told you to stop because I said you've got to do the kosher Shrita, kill it as I commanded you.
But what about that next line? That's bothersome.
One
What's the
second.
next
I want to
line?
go back to Dvarim 12, verse 23. It says, "Do not eat the soul with the flesh." That means you can't eat the flesh of a live animal. That's Aver min hachai. The limb from a living animal is not kosher. We said it only applies to animals and to mammals and birds, not to fish and locusts. But that's the first issue, is Evel min hachai. Second issue is nevela. Third issue is terefa. Okay, those are the three prohibitions which you avoid by doing shechita. By doing shechita, you can avoid a limb of a live animal, and you can avoid nevela because you're going to have it properly killed, and you're avoiding treifa because it's not dying because of any illness; it's dying because you're killing it. All three of them are forbidden to eat if you have not had the kosher shechita. Whoever eats meat which has not been kosher shechita is one kazayit of it. If you do it on purpose, and there's witnesses, you could be, the Torah punishment is lashes. The only difference between these three prohibitions is regarding the laws of purity and impurity. Nowadays, that only the nevela and the treifa, that only the nevela is impure and the treifa is not impure. But since they don't apply nowadays, it doesn't make a difference. They're both non-kosher. We call them both treif. The difference between them more is in the time when there was a temple. Okay, yes, question?
So what we were just going over in Devarim chapter 12, I didn't notice until just now, but the laws of what animals you can eat, not eat, and how to kill it properly in chapter 12 is right next to, right before the concept of the false prophet, right there.
Interesting.
And so I was curious to know what the connection is there.
Me too. I'm curious too.
Because the false prophet is immediately after that.
Yeah, I wonder. Many times it's a curious thing, the juxtaposition of different laws, especially in the book of Devarim, but throughout the Torah. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not obvious at all. I don't know. Okay, yeah.
What's the second part of line 21 have? I mean, where it says, and thou shalt eat in thy gates whatever thy soul lusts after. It sounds like the one was saying, the rules I gave you for the animals you can eat are for when you do a sacrifice, but if you're in your own gates, you can eat whatever you want.
Exactly the opposite. In other words, you might think that the only place you're allowed to eat meat is when you're bringing part of it as a sacrifice to the Lord in the temple. Here the Torah says, no, there's such a concept called meat that you lust after, and you don't want to bring the sacrifice to the Lord. You still have to make sure that you keep the laws of Shrita and the other laws of blood that we're going to talk about later, tomorrow maybe. But this is an allowance. The Torah makes an allowance that you're allowed to eat. It's called meat of lust, in Basar Ta'ava, and you can do that whether you're in Tel Aviv or in Metula or Haifa. You can do shechita anywhere around the world. You don't have to bring the animal as a korban as long as you keep these rules of properly slaughtering it.
Does tava have the negative connotations?
It does
in
have a little bit of a
Hebrew that
negative.
lust does in
It
English?
does have a negative connotation, and we have to be careful not to be lustful after meat. But the bottom line is the Torah says it's allowed. You're allowed to eat meat because you want to eat meat. We have to make sure. Maybe the lust today sounds inappropriate, whereas the Torah is allowing it. So obviously it's not allowing anything inappropriate. So the terminology might be a little bit misleading here. But they were saying lust as opposed to sacrifice in the temple. That's the context. It was meaning only because you want to eat meat, not because you want to bring a sacrifice to the Lord. That's the flip side. The opposite is not, basically mitzvah versus non-mitzvah is what the Torah is trying to say. Mitzvah, bringing a good korban, making a part of your religious worship, or just because you want to eat meat, right? That's nothing necessarily, the Torah allows it. The Torah says it doesn't have to, not every eating meat has to be part of a religious ceremony. There's still rules that have to make it kosher. Okay, we'll stop here. So Hashem will continue the laws of Shrita. Tomorrow you're going to learn the 5 conditions. You can all be a shochet after tomorrow's lesson. Very simple.
Yeah.
It's only 5 principles. You'll know them off by heart, and we'll see that tomorrow.
You got a recording of him saying that.
Okay, Rob,